Welcome to this problem-solving approach for headstand. So these complex poses in yoga asana put together all sorts of different movements in the body. If we have a quick think about headstand, we have lots of shoulder flexion. That means that your arms have to reach up by your ears, and then you have to bend your elbows, and at the same time you want to keep your lower ribs from flaring, so this action has to come genuinely from the shoulder joint, not just by hinging forward through the spine. So that's one part. Then you've got the strength to lift the legs, and you've got the whole orientation of being upside down. In order to lift the legs, there's lots of hip flexion strength, core stability, and the walking in is a forward fold. So if we just do this shape, feel free to just have a play with me and you will see what I'm talking about. Sit up tall, pull your elbows back. Maybe you could do it like this if you wanted, or like this, and then try and fold in like this. And you'll see that that's quite hard. And that's what you're trying to do, but upside down. So we need to find some little workarounds so that we don't have to be able to do all those things, or we can just keep practicing. The whole joy of yoga is that there's so much that we can do in terms of asana and everything else. So if you're getting towards your headstand and you're finding that your back is just rounding, say you're coming like this and you just feel like you're rounding and like you're going to roll that way, or if you video it and you see you're just rounding and you're going to roll that way, it could be that your upper back is not particularly flexible. You haven't got so much extension in your thoracic spine. So you could work that in dynamic ways. So what I would suggest for people who that's the instance, that's the example, is to go back to those practices where we're lying on the front and we're doing lots of back bends, or just always add into your practice some Sphinx or Cobra poses. Feel free to do them with me now, or to do any of these kind of actions where you're really getting the extensors of the spine to work, or locust pose. Any of the back bends, the active ones, but also the passive ones. Because when we're mobilizing the body, it's partly the muscles need to work, but your nervous system also has to tell your body that it's okay to relax in those poses. So, for example, you could lie over the bolster this way. Again, you will have all these in all the prep classes, so it's just choosing the ones that you want to repeat, or putting together your own little program. So you might want to, for example, lie like this. You may have been avoiding it because it felt too uncomfortable, but if it's uncomfy, just prop your head more, or make this thing lower and do this kind of thing. This is going to be the same principle if your shoulders were holding you back. Do some of the active lifting and lowering, but also some of these passive ones. So something like this would be good if it's your upper back. If it's your shoulders, let's run through that in more detail. Same principle. For mobility work, we want to do active and then passive, both. Those passive holds maybe 3-4 minutes, and the active maybe, again, 3-4 minutes of active work. So active, if you find that you can't get your arms up straight up, then we're looking at shoulder mobility. Any of this stuff that we've been doing, the examples I've given have been things like this. That's one. There's been this, where we do it without the belt and then we spin the arms. 2, in the standing poses, we've been doing quite a lot in Utkatasana, say pulling the arms back here or here, any of these ones for the shoulders. And the same locust positions, but bringing the arms up and over when you're lying on the floor. So this kind of action in any position, standing, sitting, lying. So add more of those in if it seems to be your shoulders. Now, this stuff. The other thing about shoulders, and this is a little bit of a conundrum, because the question is, are you very strong? So what I see with some of the climbers is that the shoulders are not super flexible, because when they're climbing, they're going through not a full range of motion always. They might be holding on like this. I know I am if I go climbing. So if you've not been stretching the shoulders, and you've been doing more gym work as well, is the same. People often aren't going through the full range of motion. So if that's the case, sometimes the body's super strong and you're ready for headstand, but you need the 3-point headstand. So I'll do a separate class on that. But essentially, it's this one, where your hands and your head make an equilateral triangle, like this. And you can see just from the shape of it, I've got much more weight in my head. So actually in yoga, there's all sorts of different headstands. There's this one, and then there's ones like where your arms are even further away. Let's see if I can move into them from here. And so the weight goes more and more and more into the head. So essentially, you would want to have trained for this rather than come straight into it, because otherwise you end up with neck ache because your neck muscles need to be ready to hold the weight. But sometimes I see a student who's quite strong and not got lots of shoulder flexion, and then I teach them that version. We could also use the wall, if it's the hamstrings that are tight, into either headstand version. So that was my little bit about if it's the shoulders. Thirdly, if the hamstrings are tighter, you can either do it away from the wall and step up onto stepping stones like something like this, or the bolsters, or you can use the wall. So what that is going to look like is you just know that in your forward fold, for example, you're like this, or your body's leaning back. Because again, if you look at the direction of the headstand when I walk in, I tend to come all the way to here. You can see that's quite a deep forward fold before I then go up. Yeah, and then keep pushing, pushing, pushing through the arms. You want the shoulder blades to be lifting before you go up. So if your hamstrings are not going to allow that, you need to be here, pushing through the wrists, pulling up with the shoulder blades. Then I don't need to walk in so much. And then you can play here. So this is also a nice place to learn the balance if you're starting to feel steady. The main problem, I think, is that if we use the wall here and we tend to be quite bendy in the back, it's easy to overkick. And then you end up with this kind of thing, which is not the end of the world. It just might not feel super stable. So that's your hamstring thing. You can use the wall for a walking, or this kind of thing. I think I prefer the wall, to be honest. This feels a bit more tentative. But you could go like this. Say like that, for example. Good. This brings me into talking about how we get up into the pose. Because when I was doing that on the bricks, I lifted one leg at a time because it felt a bit more tricky. But what I find is if people kick up, especially you bendy lot, like me, if we kick up, it's harder to find the stability. So let me show you what I mean by that. Say I want to come up and I go like this. I haven't got that, I've already extended at the hip. In other words, I've already gone into a back bend shape. Because when you do hip extension also goes with lumbar extension, the two go together. But in headstand, we want neutral lumbar, neutral pelvis. So I prefer to go from hip flexion straight up, rather than kick one leg, kick the other leg, and you're in extension. That's why I try to get people going into this kind of position first, and then straight up. So if I was there with you, I would stand behind you here to the side, and I would just have you like bend one knee, the other knee, and then be like straight up. And then what I find people tend to do, especially if we're a bit bendy, is the feet have gone this way,
So what you want to imagine is that your toes are hovering over your nose. Yeah, it's going to feel, if you're very bendy, it's going to feel like you're in a forward fold. You want to feel like your toes are hovering just over your nose. You can't see your toes, but they're in that kind of position. And then what you could practice is from standing, hips over heels, ribs over pelvis. Arms are going to have to come back like this. So you're in the position and you'll feel that you have that slightly scooped out feeling. And you could also practice your low boat. In the gym, they'd call it hollow body hold. You could practice this kind of thing because it's really just here. Yeah, pelvis, ribs, pelvis, ribs. So you bendy lot. Practice being a little bit more closed in the front of the body. Tie the ribs and the pelvis together and keep them together. Yeah, so when you practice that at the wall, if we do that at the wall, we don't want to kick up super high. We want to, you don't want to kick up high with one leg. You still want to ideally go in. So my hips are flexed and then push the shoulders up and then up. And if you're using the wall, just have one leg bent, pull up, or both legs bent, but tailbone towards pubic bone, ribs towards pelvis, and then you learn. So essentially, if we can learn away from the wall, ideally that's better. It might be that you could practice next to your sofa. So you put your mat here, and then here's your sofa, or your settee, whatever you call it, your couch, and then if you fall, you're not so worried, you're not so scared that you're going to fall and hurt yourself. You're just going to do a forward fold. The last thing we're going to look at is using 4 bricks, which is for your upper back, if that seems to be rounding, or if it's hard to lift the shoulders up away from the ground. So, brick, brick. This one I call Stonehenge. Yes. I did just do the sound of the song from Spinal Tap. Right, so this goes like this. You have your little Stonehenginess, and then you put 1 brick here. So if you've got other props, you can use anything for this bit. You just want something that's going to dig into your back here, and you could obviously make the shape of it a bit different. These need to angle because the forearms are going to be angled in. Now I can kick up for this one because I'm not going to be able to swing my hips to the wall enough to counterbalance. So wrists press, shoulders lift in this normal way, walk in, get your back pressing and then kick up. Find the wall, and then that's going to press right into the tricky area of the upper back, and you can hopefully find your balance there. That's it. It's a fabuloso way, and yeah, super nice. If you think of another way to do the base, to do Stonehenge, let me know. Those are some of the approaches to problem solving, but essentially if you realize that what you're working with is shoulder flexibility and strength, we haven't talked so much about strength, but all of those dolphin kind of press ups and things we've looked at do that. Shoulder flexibility and strength, hamstrings, core, hip flexion, and balance, and that coordination between the pelvis and the ribs. So there is a lot coming together. You can just work with any one element or all of the elements, and then one day headstand will come. That is much more wise than just trying to nail headstand. It will come easily once each of the ingredients is in place.